time. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Mindset Shifts podcast. And today, as our guest, we have Roxana Popet. Roxana is an NLP trained and transformational speaker specialized in fear support. She simplifies fear and mindset so that you become your best professional version. Your fears gets transformed in focus on solutions through very efficient life mindset exercises and complex speeches. You are trained to answer to yourself to empowering life-changing questions such as, how can I focus on solution now despite the current situation? What am I learning from this experience now? Why do I feel the way that I do? You see fear from a different perspective in just one session of 1 hour, as Roxana combines the most effective subconscious communication techniques with specific decision-making processes, so that no more stress and no more procrastination in a very short period of time. What else, Roxana? I mean, there's so much to say. What am I missing here?
You are not missing anything, Eugene, and thank you for having me with you today. Such a pleasure because, as we said earlier, so many things left unsaid since our previous talk. So it's us giving our audience a bit of very effective and efficient exercises to conquer their fears on the spot, not wait anymore.
Wonderful. It's wonderful to have you here, Roxana, and talk a little bit more about mindset and fears, especially in this day and age where, you know, fear, anxiety, tension, worry is at the forefront of everyone's consciousness. So the work that you're doing is extremely important, helping organizations and just people to conquer their emotional state so that they can achieve their, personal goals. They expand their mindset and just step over their fears. Now, Roxana, how would you, how would you describe the work that you're doing for the companies? Like, what is it that you are working with? What is it that you're facing out there right now?
This is such a good question because as I myself have been employed almost 10 years ago, the situation is completely different now because we are different. Society has evolved so much that it actually fascinates me to see both similarities, but at the same time, differences in people's mindsets. The most common issue that I have seen in young entrepreneurs and young employees, especially because they are my goal, I get to see a lot of stress and procrastination. And if we go a bit deeper at the very core of the problem, we are going to find that there are several types of fears. Fear of the unknown, and the strongest one is fear that I won't get things done in due time.
Yeah, fear of the unknown, and then the fear of deadlines is extremely common, especially the fear of the unknown, since we are living in this era of uncertainty. So what advice do you normally give to people who kind of facing these problems and unable to deal and cope with the situation that requires a lot of concrete steps in a time of uncertainty?
As you said in my description, I love to simplify everything. I'm simplifying mindset and fear because when I go to someone that is already pretty stressed out, even burned out, upset that they didn't meet their deadlines for a few weeks, a few months, then it's something super easy, something that they can deal with on the spot. And it is these questions. And the first question that I ask this person is, why are you feeling the way that you do right now? And I'm going to advise this to our audience to test this out because it seems like a pretty easy question. However, take a piece of paper and take a pen. This is mandatory. This is such a complex exercise. When you start pouring your thoughts, your beliefs from here, you put them down on a piece of paper. This is almost magical, Eugene, because getting your fears and getting your limiting beliefs in your awareness makes them disappear in 99% of the cases. So my job is actually very easy. I go there, I actually spend half an hour with the people that I'm coaching, with the group, with the managers, because they get to realize, okay, when I put these things down, and there are also a few other questions depending on each case, because we are all very different in our needs in business, people start to focus on solutions as well. They start putting down all of the issues, the beliefs, the limiting beliefs, most of them. But then the solution pops out also. So the other half an hour, I'm going to answer to some questions just to make sure that people are on the right track. Since I myself have been such a victim, and this very strong person that got to be more than a victim of the circumstances. I used to be a prisoner, and it was terrifying. I have got to say that this is why I have been doing what I'm doing for quite a while now, since I don't want anyone to go through what I have. Because, you know, people say that fear is false evidence appearing real, and it may be, but you feel it in your body. And people say, okay, how can it not be real? Because I myself have also felt it in every single cell, in every part of my body. And it is the mental pain that I am going after and helping people to conquer this. And it's 100% efficient when you get to do this several days. Ask yourself this question or other similar questions for a few days, and oh my goodness, in around 2 weeks, you are a completely different new person. And I do believe in self-coaching.
Yeah, that's a fascinating point. The question: why am I feeling the way I'm feeling now? And especially why part. Why actually is a very strong, powerful questions that takes us to justify our position. It could be a really dangerous question to ask in a lot of circumstances. You have to master the art of asking why questions, because since the very early childhood, this is the first question we actually master, and kids could be really, giving us a lot of trouble by asking endless why questions, and we sort of inherit this limiting belief and response of defensiveness when someone is asking why question. But when you're using it for a sort of self-discovery, self-exploration, asking yourself why question triggers this defensiveness, and you're able to gain insight into yourself if you're patient enough, if you're open enough to explore your own mindset, explore your own limiting beliefs. And I think it's extremely important to have someone there, professional coach who's specializing in this, because it could be really difficult experience to go through this exercise. It could be really emotional because you're tapping literally in your nervous system that is quite often overwhelmed, stressed, burned out, and now you're literally touching the raw nerve by using your mental capacity to dive a little bit deeper into your psyche, and it could be a really painful experience. So someone's professional guiding you through this mindset expansion exercise is extremely important. Now, Roxana, what I immediately noticed from the very first conversation we started is the way you communicate with people. You have this tremendous amount of gratitude, warmth, and compassion when you communicate. I would like to ask you, really, is this something that you always had, or is it something that you consciously practiced?
This is a very good question. And saying that I always had this would be a lie. I have had to make conscious, tremendous effort because I come from a place of extreme fear. I grew up in a family with a lot of communism influence. And although I was only 3 years young when the communism fell, I can still feel the results of it, because people here in Romania, where I am, even if I have traveled the world and I have seen it all, people have this tendency of being afraid to be who they are, to express themselves, to be creative, authentic, but that authenticity that's very deep down inside the core of someone, their heart, their soul. And of course, the young generation is more free and they have more creativity. But me being compassionate and, as you say, warm with the person that I am talking to, usually with my audience, got to be happening in quite some years, because I got to be questioning, how would I myself like to be treated? I used to be very, very judgmental of people. I used to be afraid of people. I have, Eugene, been through all of the worst possible negative, strongest emotions in communication, because I think it's almost not more than 3 years now since I became a trainer, a certified trainer, and I got to be practicing a lot, that I conquered the fear of speaking in public, the fear of being myself without needing to please people. I have spent, I think, a decade at least being that perfect person that would not bother anyone. I would be very quiet in a corner, not saying anything. God forbid I would upset anyone with a look of mine. But then I got to be asking myself one of these questions, like, why am I feeling like this? Because I wasn't feeling like myself. I wasn't feeling like anyone, actually. I felt empty. I didn't have any real values. I had to construct it all from the books that I read, the webinars, the courses, the people that I met. And it got me thinking that I was in tremendous amount of pain if I continue to not be treating people as I would really honestly would like me to be treated by them from their hearts, to have this real loving connection with people, because I think that this is the purpose of our existence here on this planet, making the world a better place. And how can you make it better? People get in touch with a word of ours, with a smile, with a look of ours. You can really shape and influence someone's day with a look, with a greeting, with the way you use your words. So it's me working on this quite a bit, and it's still work in progress. I have got to admit that I'm not even close to where I want to be, since my goals as a speaker are very high, but it's a beautiful journey.
Absolutely, absolutely wonderful. And you touched on self-judgment and trying to fit in with people, sort of avoiding the conflict, avoiding the exposure, avoiding being seen for who you are. So these fears, quite often they stem from, well, actually, this is sort of an old programming, right? It's not something that you learned consciously and said, you know what, that's a great pattern of behavior, I'm just gonna run with it, right? It is just something that we learn from society. It's just something that we pick up from the environment. And at some point of time, it might be helpful to have this mindset because it's protecting you. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. It's all protection mechanism. But once you go, with your life and you encounter different situations and you realize, well, perhaps this no longer serves me. And at this stage, what happens from my experience with a lot of people, certain percentage of people get in self-denial. So they start to beating themselves up. I don't want to be this way, but I am that way. Or they begin to find validation out there to prove that they're right or wrong about, the way they are. And a certain amount of people, they begin to change. They begin to experience so much pain that it becomes almost an enlightening experience. And I think there is a research that points out that before enlightenment, there is always a tremendous suffering happening in certain group of people, that a lot of so-called enlightened people actually had to experience a lot of pain, fear, judgment, persecution before they were able to make this switch, before the pain became so unbearable that they had to kind of, completely rewire their mindset. How is it looking from your experience? How are people normally conquering their fears or dealing with this sort of obstacles in their ways?
This is very interesting because if you would have asked me this a year ago, I would say that I'm such an opposite poles. I either like it pain or pleasure. I'm going to avoid pain, or I'm going to have amazing amounts of pleasure. But now, since the pandemic has been quite a bit present in our lives, especially last year here in Romania, we had to be inside for quite a lot of time. I got to be so much more introspective, and now I am digging into this middle ground, that balance that is extremely appealing to me because I like to have a taste of it all. I'm curious, and I know that we have talked about curiosity not too long ago. I am deciding that as a human being, my goal would be an observer, which means that I can both tap into the emotion, take the benefits, take the lesson if it's something that's not that supportive. But I want to see it all. I want to see the contrasts of feeling both fear and then feeling extremely courageous. Because when you get a bit into that more negative emotion, you get this realm of sensations and you get to see and to appreciate the other side a bit better. Now, I'm still kind of experimenting here, but I'm loving this observing phase that I'm going towards, which means that I choose to be in a flow state, to be creative and to have a powerful mindset, to feel at my very best at all times. But if something happens, I allow myself to be angry. I allow myself to be upset, to be worried. And I'm taking some more lessons because I have seen that you get to evolve tremendously, Eugene. When you tap into something that's not that comfortable. I think that each emotion comes with a message and you get to have some amazing learnings. And I think that us people, our nature is fascinating because of the paradigm of emotions that we have, because we are curious. But then again, we want to be safe. We love the comfort zone. We have this tendency to be loved, to be a part of the community. But then again, we need to focus on the self to nurture our being, because you can't give from an empty bag. So I would suggest to our audience to allow themselves to experiment all emotions, because at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong. There are no negative emotions. You get to learn the lesson. And a great question that I would advise that you can maybe also put in practice, Eugene, which I love doing at the end of the day. What am I learning from today's experiences now? Oh my goodness. If you maybe had an argument with someone, or maybe a client meeting didn't go as you have expected, take a look, take a step back, and see what you can do better next time. Yeah, these questions with why am I feeling this? What do I have to learn? Or how can I do this better? Why, what, how? These are the magical questions that give you a whole new perspective in a matter of minutes, but be mindful to always have a pen and a piece of paper to put it down.
Yeah, this is extremely important. I remember being my young self, going through similar exercises where I had to record myself, not so much on the paper, but actually through the voice, so I could hear it, so I could play it back to myself and listen to my own voice when I describe some of those things. And it is, I consider consciousness to be like a flashlight. and subconscious mind is like shadows, and something is always lurking in the shadows, and it might not necessarily be true, but your perception is your power. So sometimes there is certain shadows that the shadows is a play of light. And you know, you think that there might be something in this dark corner, but you have your flashlight, which is your consciousness, and everything that you put in the focus with the flashlight just disappears suddenly. So when you're asking yourself these questions, sometimes, you know, people, at least from my experience, you're asking yourself this question and nothing comes out. Well, it's also an answer. It's also you know, when emptiness comes, when there is just empty space, this is when you are allowing things to be. This is when you're searching through your unconscious mind, unconscious patterns, and pulling something out. Whatever's coming next to your mind is always leading you towards something deeper in yourself. Now, it's your job really is to not resist what's happening, not say, oh, this is bad, oh, this is, oh, I'm so sad, I'm so, you know, I don't want to be that, I don't want to feel that. So that becomes a resistance, right? And what you resist persists. So when you go through this exercise, and I 100% agree with you, you've got to be in a state of non-resistance. You have to become curious. Sometimes it's the fear on top of judgment, on top of anger, and on top of unfulfilled desires. And it's all this pot of toxicity brewing inside of you. And it's hard to kind of stay present to this. So Roxana, I got a question, like, how would you tap into your emotions at the deeper level? Now, let's say you ask those questions. Let's say something appears that you're putting down on the paper. What would be the next step in your practice?
Oh, this is such a good question, Eugene, because I did leave a bit aside of the exercise as it is a bit lengthy, but it is a good starting point, even if you do the only first phase of it. Now, as you say, sometimes we feel that we just don't get the words coming out. We don't get the letters combining into words. The thing is that, as you said, you don't need to force it. What I suggest is that even if you get to write a few words, and even if you don't, just let your pen do a bit of magic on the piece of paper. This is a technique that I call to be the best frustration release ever, because you have in the back of your mind, your subconscious mind is working. It has there some frustrations maybe left. It has some other types of fears. And if you can't connect to it all at first, just let yourself, give yourself the luxury of not writing anything down, of not judging anything. Don't overthink and don't think anything else. Just let your mind eliminate a bit of resistance to just having some easy lines. Just relax and give it all in. Give your conscious mind a bit of a break and let that subconscious do the work, because in a few minutes you are going to see how you have so much more creativity and you are so much more willing to just let it out. Let's say that you have completed this phase, the first phase, and you feel that, okay, I have put everything down. But usually you need to go down a few more layers and ask yourself either the same question several times, maybe 2 or 3 times more, or have some versions of the same question. It depends on the answers that you write last on that piece of paper. You need to be asking yourself questions that provide you elaborate answers. Obviously, not yes or no questions, because it's not the case here. We just want you to get it all out so that you feel that relief. When do you know that the exercise is done with the writing? When you feel that, oh my goodness, this was it. Was I afraid of this? Was I angry because of this? This is nonsense. When you feel that, Okay, now I understand. Okay, this is what happened. Then you know that the exercise is done. What you need to do next, it depends on how you feel. Do you feel like doing something that you really love to disconnect from it all? Or do you feel that there may be something similar, but from a different problem that may be related to the same issue that you have worked on a few minutes earlier, because this is how our mind works. It creates connections and all sorts of memories. And then you get a thought about something that maybe happened 20 years ago when you were a child. Just let yourself not feel any resistance. Be mindful, get a bit into your conscious mind then and there when you have that aha moment, and do what you feel that it's best for you then. I think that intuition is vital. Maybe we as a society don't talk about it as much as we should. You cannot get enough of you tapping into your real needs, because who knows better than you what to do next? It's only you to decide.
Or so much to unpack here, and I really love the idea of when you're exploring the problems, just letting your subconscious mind explore the paper and pen exercise. Actually, I think there is a Russian scientist who specializes in this. I can't quite remember what was the name of this method. I think it's called neurographics or some sort of.
I think so too. I think so too.
What they were saying, and just to kind of expand on this, because I think it's really powerful exercise when you just take a piece of paper and pen and you just start drawing the soft lines and in any shape or forms, but there is actually art to this, which they teach on how to approach this solution in the right way. And what happens then after you kind of draw certain patterns, you start softening the corners, you start softening the lines to make it, to shape it up a little bit. And what actually happens after a certain time that you're doing, the picture start looking like a neurons in the brain. It's kind of becoming these clusters of things in different shapes of forms, and it really helps you to tap into your unconscious mind and pull out some of the things that are impossible to pull out with words or with a mental sort of verbal projections of it. It might come in forms of images or dread or certain extreme sensations. And when you're putting it out on the paper, now you're focusing on specific cluster of these lines, and it's going to associate with this specific emotional state that you're currently feeling. So it is absolutely fascinating how much things you could pull out from different ways of approaching your exploration of your own subconscious processes. Now, questions, of course, is perhaps one of the more obvious ways to do that, because we want logical, rational decisions, like I want X, Y, Z to follow steps A, B, C to achieve certain results. But there is also art and intuition and art is somehow connected. Somehow maybe it's one or the other. Actually, maybe intuition and art or creativity is one thing, really. So trying to explore it, even if you don't know how to draw it, I cannot put two lines together, but I've done this exercise that you explained, right? And there is something about it, something special about it, that even non-visual artists like me could use and implement in their own self-discovery work. So thank you so much for the tip there. So I would like to ask you, Roxana, so I would like to come back a little bit to your communication style, because you were consciously working on this, and the way you use your voice in a very soft, calm manner, the words that are rolling off your tongue are always soft and caring. And actually, what came to mind the first time I met you and I looked at your profile and I see that you're from Romania, and I come from the small country from ex-Soviet space, Latvia. And in Riga, Romanian families were very famous for their persuasion abilities. Sometimes from bad angle and from the good angle, but there is something mysterious about Romanian, population that was residing in Riga, for the ability to enter the minds and hearts of people that they speak with, and then guide them towards the certain things that they want in effect. Is this just a stereotype, really, or is there something about the culture and something about, the beliefs that Romanian people hold that allows you to kind of expand in this mindset and skill set?
This is so interesting, Eugene. Well, I have got to say that as I see the Romanian people, and I sometimes like to compare the cultures since I get to experiment some of them. I see them as very creative, which means that we as a people, due to hardship through the decades, because there were all sorts of wars and all sorts of changes in how the country looked over the centuries. I think that we got this ability to deal with anything. No matter what happens out there, I think that we as a conscious, the Romanian conscious knows that, okay, we suffer, there is a bit of victim mentality, which sometimes is helpful because it just pushes you to start something new, because at the end of the day, sometimes you just get full, you have enough of suffering, but then you start looking for solutions. So I think that this is a very wonderful, such a privilege for the Romanian people to use this hardship and then transforming it into, I know what I want. Let me be the best that I can in that very moment, to see how I can get help, how I can get support, how maybe I can support others. So I think that it's this subconscious motto at the end of the day, because I don't think that people are 100% conscious that they do this. I think it's something in the DNA of the community. But it's interesting that you mentioned this, because Romanians are pretty much seen as people that can deal with mostly anything and make the best of any situation.
Hmm. That's fascinating, hearing this from coming from Romanian, and as you exploring different cultures, you see the differences in mentality and how they approach things. And from my side, growing up in Latvia and then moving to UK, living there for a few years and then coming back, it's like you start seeing the matrix. It's like you start seeing a certain patterns of behavior that are universally true to majority of people of that nation. And you coming back again to another society and see how it's structured, and coming to Thailand and see the completely different culture and completely different religion, and everything is upside down, literally and figuratively speaking, on the other side of the world. And it makes kind of you realize that people live in very different ways, but we all have universal fears and problems that we face throughout our lives, and these problems are universally the same. So the differences between us are actually, on the deeper level, are very minimal. And it's like you mentioned, it's similar to the onion. Like the first surface level question that you can ask yourself, why am I feeling this way right now? You're going to have a surface answer. And as you peel this onion, you go deeper and deeper, and it might be connected to something else in your life. Most likely, it is something connected to other maybe fears or other worries that you might be having. And at the same time, it is kind of, I heard this expression: the more pain I think you experience, the more universal this pain is. So, for example, the loss of a loved one, that's pretty universal, like the sickness of the family member, right? Or inability to act, or to save someone from certain dreadful situations. We all have this ingrained in our deep inside our DNA and nervous system, and the deeper layers of subconsciousness that's been there for millions of years. Because this part of the brain, neocortex, that says, why this, why that, what about this, how about that, this is a relatively new piece of kit that we have developed over the not so long ago, a couple of 1 million, I think, or 2 million years ago. So compared to other systems and reptilian brain and lizard brain, that the part of our systems that we have, which are much more primal, much more ancient. So I would like to kind of dive a little bit into the work that you're doing with companies, and how do you approach dealing with organizations when you is it a similar approach when you're working with the group and guiding them through the process, or it changes the dynamic in organization, how you approach those problems?
Thank you for asking me this. I have find it so much more fulfilling to feel the group energy, to see that if there are 10, 20, 50, even 100 people in a group, in a department, it's going to sound very interesting when I say that they kind of have the same vibe, because otherwise they would not be there. So the fear in taking decisions, this is something that I mostly focus on. We take mental decisions very easily. Let's face it, we all know what we have to do next. I don't like it where I'm now. I want to change my job, or I just want to start a new business, or I want a new business partner. It's clear. But then putting it in practice may be taking you a few weeks, a few months. So I'm here to shorten that amount of time, to take the decision today, put it in practice now, the very second, don't wait anymore. That group feeling, that group energy gives me once again that confirmation that we are all one. So I have to say that there's no difference in me working with a group of 2 people, or with 1 person, or with 10, 50, 100, or even more. It's basically the same. However, I see that people are more engaged. The bigger the group is, they are more aware. They get to be conscious that, okay, we are all in this, we are all one. So all of that positive curiosity that people have when they look for solutions, when they truly want to take their mindset to a new level, is tenfold, 100-fold more powerful. So it's me showing up and talking to them as one. Once again, even if it's just 1 person or 100, it's beautiful to see that people ask for help, which means that it's courageous. I love dealing with courageous people. I love the respect that they show for themselves. It's not easy, as you say, it's not easy to ask yourself questions. It's being guided at first. It's you tapping into something that may be a bit too painful for you to deal with at first. As everyone says, the first time it's the most challenging, but it is also the most fulfilling, because after you have the first session, oh my goodness, things begin to change. And slowly but surely you get this exercise brought back into your conscious mind. And we all know that when you have a habit put in the back of your mind, it's success. You do it by default in a matter of days, a matter of weeks. And my biggest motivation is to not let anyone be dealing with what I have dealt in the past, because my experience, my story is how not to. I was uncoachable. I waited 8 years to take a decision, and well, not to take it because I took it mentally, but to put it in practice. So my goal is so focused, I'm so driven that's why I only have 30-minute speeches. People are 100% engaged. They're pumped up. And the next half an hour, people ask questions and just making sure that they are completely aligned. And it's beautiful, Eugene. The transformation is outstanding. Indeed, it's more fulfilling for me to see 50 people being transformed at once than 10, or seeing 100 people plus being transformed. It's so much better than 50, but it's a beautiful journey, and I applaud each and every one of my clients' successes, because it's a completely different life when you get to understand that you're just a question away for being in control of it all.
It's fascinating. You mentioned that when you're working with organizations with maybe 50 to 100 people, they all kind of in the same state of mind. And once you engage in your work, once they starting to pull out this emotions of fear, anxiety, tension, and then the whole room transforms, the energy transforms, and just being surrounded by like-minded people who are going through the same process is incredibly powerful for the transformative work that that you're doing. I really would like you to ask you this, like, how do you break down fears? What are the stages of fears?
Well, fear is much more simple than we think. We as humans like to overcomplicate things, and that's okay. It's part of our nature. And as I said earlier, this paradigm of wanting to be safe, but then wanting to explore the world, it's the same with fear. Fear is a part of us. It is who we are. Fear has a very important role in keeping us safe. So when you get to realize that fear is here to actually help you, it's your ally, it's your friend, it's a blessing that only shows you that you need to ask yourself a bit more than what's at the surface. Go down, as you say, in the onion, take all the layers. You get the lesson that pulls you out of that state of fear, which, by the way, lasts a few seconds if you start to go down into that process. However, regret, on the other hand, I also say about regret in times of comparing the time frame. Be mindful that fear only lasts a few seconds. Regret lasts a lifetime. So we want to make sure that there is no regret, no negative energy coming from any situation in the past, for anything that you wish that you have had done, but something happened and you couldn't. Dealing with regret is so much more difficult than dealing with fear. That's why, as people understand through 5-minute speeches and great examples that it is a part of us. We get to be afraid because we think that something may happen to harm our body. This is the main, it's fear of death. If you get to layer it and ask yourself more and more questions, it's this fear of death at the base of it all. Now, fear of death is something that you can keep with you, but still it's going to happen because this is how the human mind is. We simply need to accept the obvious. There are things that you cannot change, things that you need to accept as they are, and just see fear as your biggest supporter, just showing you the path. Are you afraid to do something? It means that you need to look a bit more, take an extra step and see what is happening in that path. It's the path that you need to take because the lessons are amazing. Yes, maybe that fear could be right. You have started a business that failed. Oh my God, what do you do then? But Roxana, you just told me that fear is a blessing. I just had my company going down. Should I not be afraid? Yes. However, feel the fear, as we said earlier, but take the lesson, knowing that there are certain things that we simply cannot control. You cannot control the weather. Why not use it to your advantage? Plan the picnic when it's not raining. If something has happened in business that has made you lose it all, okay, next time you will know what not to do. Take the lesson, change the perspective, and these questions, and there are tens of types of questions. You can imagine, Eugene, so many questions depending on where the person is, what they want, what their current situation is. Ask yourself the question, and I like to see my clients only once. They don't see me ever again because I love to give them all the tools. You don't need more. You don't need to be depending on anyone out there to have a healthy, strong, empowering state. And as I said earlier, I do believe in self-coaching, but I also think, as you say, that at the beginning, you need someone to help you. And as you are with EFT, maybe at first it may seem strange, but if you go and show people how to tap, how to release the stress, it's basically the same thing as in my case. People learn to do it by themselves, and I'm happy not to see my clients ever again.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I mean, self-coaching and empowering people with tools that they can take away anywhere and everywhere to help them deal with the stress, anxiety, fear. You also said something really interesting, that fear only lasts few seconds, but regret could last a lifetime. It's very interesting because for me, regret is tightly associated with guilt and shame. It could be self-shaming or it could be guilt, and which is a very low states of consciousness. In fact, it is the severity of it is so bad that because of guilt and shame, people are normally losing lives. They committing suicides. It's a deep depression. Fear is actually above that, and it's like you said, you could be fearful for a few moments, and then just anxiety sets in, and you become over vigilant about certain things that you're looking out for out there, and it might trigger some fear. But guilt and shame, it's much harder to pull out people from. Now there is something that I'd like to share. There is this body of work called Map of Consciousness, or Levels of Energy, by Frederick Dodson, and there was another by Professor Hawkins, which actually maps out the levels of energy, and lowest levels are actually guilt, shame, then it goes to fear, then it goes to desire, the desire to change perhaps, or desire to get away from fear, and above that is anger. So it's a very fascinating dynamic. You can maybe remove the fear from the equation, but then your desire, it's at the higher level of consciousness. It might give you certain desire, but if it's not a fulfilled desire, you go back to anger, and anger could trigger guilt and shame, and this whole conundrum is keep moving. It is this loop, feedback loop of negativity, or lower states of consciousness. So fear could be also addressed by anger, because anger is a very powerful emotions to propel you forward. It is not a long-term emotion to kind of dive into, because it's distractive. It is a stress in itself, anger, but it also could be very beneficial in exploring your own psyche. And when you become afraid of something, perhaps change the perspective and say, evoke anger, because that's a propelling energy forward over there. But yes, regret, shame, guilt is a very difficult and hard emotional states to move out from. And kind of, because we all face it at one point of our journey. It is natural. I think it's coming from our social bonding, programming, and how we operate. We are afraid to be excluded from the group, because in old times, for eons, like if you're getting excluded, you're pretty much as good as dead. So shame, guilt, and your need to fit in with the group, it is tightly associated with survival mechanisms. So it's extremely important that you address this very heavy emotions that are sort of the lead of these emotions could be fear, but once you open this up, you have whole barrage of all the other layers of onions. What would be your suggestion or perhaps an advice of how to deal with regret, shame, and guilt?
This is such a good question. I was just thinking about this. The thing is that the past is dead. I love to simplify this much, meaning that you cannot go back there absolutely at all. Physically, it's not going to happen. But, however, you can go there mentally. And since you get to understand that you did your very best at that moment in the past with the resources that you had handy, you can simply accept and acknowledge that if you could have done more, you would have done more. Obviously, you would have done more. Even if after a minute you're going to say to yourself, oh my goodness, Roxana, why did you say this? Why on earth did you do this? It's because a few seconds earlier, a few minutes earlier, it was all you could. You thought that you are doing your very best. And we need to acknowledge this. We need to be kind to ourselves and compassionate and treat ourselves even better than we would our best friends, which very seldom happens. Let's be honest. Who is the worst critic in the world? It's ourselves, to our own person that is needing so much support from ourselves, because you only get treated on the outside by other people as you treat yourself. So respect yourself that much to know that you have done your very best. Once people understand this, the problem loosens. You see how they feel so much more relieved. They understand, okay, yeah, maybe, yeah, you're right. I could have done things different. And then I get to quickly ask them, okay, what is the lesson from this experience now? And the amount of solutions and positive experience that they want to implement next time, or how they get rid of all that shaming, that self-shaming, that's the worst of them all. It's not that someone calls you that you are not good in this department, the department is falling apart because of you. No, it's how you talk to yourself. Other people's words, yes, they influence us. They just cut like knives sometimes. But how we talk with ourselves in that subconscious voice, that dialogue, is awful. And the worst part is, Eugene, that we are not even aware that we have such a negative, destructive dialogue with ourselves. Now, people, when they get to write down the solutions that I have just asked them to think about through the question, they start being so much more kinder. And sometimes it takes even a few months until they get it all out through doing this exercise every single day for a few weeks, a few months, until they feel that, oh my God, what have I done so far? Have I been beating myself up for nothing? Because I only have me at the end of the day. Why am I self-destructing myself when, okay, now I have the tools to reconstruct, to be so powerful, to move mountains just because I decide that I can. Be your ally, be your supporter. We need to be our strongest cheerleaders. And yeah, as you say, this involves a bit more pressure, a bit extra mental length that you need to put there, because the bandwidth can just go that much because of pain, mental pain because of shame, of guilt, is awful. We need to slow it down a bit, maybe do half of the exercise one day, maybe do a quarter next day, but just never stop. My strongest, most wonderful advice for everyone listening is never, ever, never, ever stop.
Wow, that's beautiful. So kindness, self-compassion, gratitude, and it may sound cheesy. Self-love is could be actually described as the pinnacle of all the solutions, right? When you start approaching your own mistakes, your own shames and guilt with just compassion and gratitude, and giving it as much love and care as you can, and introduce a different voice in your head, different dialogue, practice it consciously, then you realize that you are multifaceted being. There is so many parts of you it's I like to compare it to a ship captain with the crew. Now the captain, our neocortex, that says this is right, this is wrong, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm not going to do. But your crew is dealing with all the storms around you that's raging on. And if you as a captain, not able to navigate and communicate with your team, chances are that you're going to crash or take on water are extremely high. So you being compassionate and understanding towards yourself that there are parts of you that are there to protect you, to safeguard you. And there are hiccups like in any organization, and you are an organization of trillions of cells working together to actually allow you to exist. You realize that you're multifaceted being with so many moving parts. There is like millions of cells dying in you, and new ours are being born and replaced. And once you start looking and tapping into this and appreciating this part of you, you realize that you're a house for tremendous amount of power, love, compassion, wars, conflicts, pains, and it's all happening on so many different layers. And once you're able to go past it and realize that no matter what happens to you, if you can greet it with love, compassion, gratitude, curiosity, this is a much more productive and inspiring states of mind that will propel you forward with ease, just like a ship in the ocean. If you know how to navigate through the obstacles and blocks, when everyone is on board and doing exactly what's necessary and essential in this moment, rather than being distracted or questioning or doubting yourself or shouting at yourself, beating yourself up, this is when growth mindset takes place, and you're able to achieve unbelievable things, literally things that you couldn't believe an hour ago, just like you said, Roxana, things that were stopping you with the fear, regret, tension, worry, anxiety. Now it's suddenly you turn this part around in yourself, and you find this tremendous amount of resources, untapped resources within you that were dedicated towards processing fear, anxiety, tension, worry, to protect you. Now, rather than protecting yourself, you're redirecting this energy towards the solution, and then wonderful things begin to happen. No matter how cheesy it sounds, it actually true. I strongly believe that, and you've seen this happen over and over again. I believe I wouldn't be lying if I say this.
Wow, I'm loving the metaphors, Eugene. And indeed, treating it all with compassion is the key to looking at it from a different perspective. And as you say, we are such an organization of cells. It's like an exterior organization that you see out there, but it's only bigger inside of us, since we are so tremendously complex that we don't even know it. Our bodies are wonders that create these chemical reactions that influence hormones, especially with us women. Oh my goodness, the postpartum reality is very real, and we simply need to sometimes just take a step back, learn the lessons, feel the emotions. Don't go too deep down, because you can still get the lesson only if you tap a bit at the surface of that emotion. And then you start to feel so much more free and alive and relieved. And indeed, Eugene, there are no limits. This is fascinating and extraordinary. We can truly do everything and anything that we set our minds to. And that's why I'm so excited for my future, that I just want to share these tools with everyone so that they can also get to be so excited and empowered to know that through some very easy questions that our audience can put in practice just now on the spot, you can see your mind as such an awesome ship that just takes you from one part of the ocean to that part where you have set your goals. And when you reach the destination, you are going to see that there's so much more to learn, which is fascinating. The journey never stops, but it gets more and more beautiful. What do you think, Eugene?
I think, Roxana, we can talk about this for hours. And, thank you so much for coming here today. So where people can find more about the work that you're doing and upcoming events or things that you're doing? What's the best way to connect with you?
Thank you so much, Eugene. I am everywhere on social media. You can find me by my name, Roxana Popet. And on my website, roxanapopet.com, I also have a free resource if people are interested in getting rid of their unnecessary emotions. Download the guide you find on my website, and you are in for the journey of your life, because that's one of the steps that makes you feel completely free to be who you are. Join me in making sure that you feel happy and fulfilled in your professional life with every step of the way.
Amazing. All the links and contact information will be in the video down below. And grab Roxana's guide to eliminate unnecessary emotions. And I suppose we'll see you on the other side of the fear. Thank you so much for coming, Roxana. It was a wonderful, wonderful way to spend this hour with you and explore fears. And I bet a lot of our, people who watching this will get a kick out of this, and a lot of wisdom has been imparted today. And the next steps would be to actually get in touch with you and see the kind of work that you're doing and get a little bit deeper into your work.
Thank you, Eugene. It's always a pleasure. Amazing questions, very insightful. What a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Roxana. Speak soon. Bye now.
Bye.